Do you remember it, that era, when just a flash of the green light on the DeLorean could make the whole family freeze in front of the boxy TV? When Back to the Future wasn't just a movie, but a doorway to dreams about the future, about time, about the kind of miracles a kid could truly believe might actually happen. Back then, we watched simply for fun, to laugh when Doc yelled, "Great Scott," to hold our breath, as Marty pushed for 88 miles per hour, and to feel our hearts tremble when the courthouse clock had only seconds left before the lightning struck.
Marty? Why are you so nervous?
Rain.
But time passed. Black and white TVs turned into sharp HD screens. And that seemingly flawless movie, when rewatched, suddenly revealed a bunch of moments we never noticed as kids. A line of dialogue that could never have made it onto VHS. A remote that says 0 volts, yet somehow controls a time-travelling car. And even a scene a little too sensitive between Marty and Lorraine, one the filmmakers would never dare to bring up again. So today, let's rewind time, not with a DeLorean, but with memory back to those nights when we squeezed together in front of the old TV to uncover 10 surprising, funny, and occasionally way too bold blooper moments from Back to the Future. 10. The car kiss scene. Lorraine's hand slips too low and the shocking chest collision accident.
What?
Hey, don't worry.
If you watched Back to the Future as a kid, you probably remember that mix of laughter and second-hand embarrassment when Lorraine attacked Marty in the car in 1955. It's the moment the whole movie flips upside down, the boy from the future getting flirted with boldly by his own teenage mother. But there's something viewers back then had no idea about. Behind the comedic surface hides one of the most unintentionally daring on-set accidents in the entire film. The scene begins innocently enough. Lorraine leans toward Marty, trying to kiss him. Marty panics and leans away. And then the first accident happens completely unscripted. When Leah Thompson places her hand on Michael J. Fox's thigh to sell the seduction, her hand accidentally slips, lower than intended. The initial touch was acting. The slide was not. Fox jolts like he's been shocked, and that exact reaction is what you see in the final cut. But that wasn't the end of it. Accident number 2 hits right after, and it's even stronger. As Lorraine leans in for the kiss, Leah Thompson's chest presses directly into Fox's. He breaks into a laugh mid-take, though the sound ends up buried under dialogue. The crew found the moment so natural, so perfectly capturing Lorraine is wildly disastrously into this, that they decided to keep it and never reshoot. Why is this considered a blooper? Because the original script never called for that level of physical contact. It was meant to be tense, not steamy. But with a tight shooting schedule and a director who loved the authenticity of the mishap, the scene stayed, turning an unscripted slip into one of the most unintentionally bold moments in the film. Did audiences notice? Of course not. The emotions ran too high. Marty was too panicked. Lorraine was too enthusiastic. No one was tracking where her hand was in that split second. Only when HD releases arrived and fans started pausing frame by frame did the truth come out. A lighting tech later recalled, "We never talked about that scene again. It was just too real, like Lorraine genuinely wanted Marty." This wasn't just a continuity error, it was a case of chemistry out of control, and it became iconic in a way absolutely no one expected. 9. Doc Brown's videotape, the line that couldn't possibly exist.
Thank God I've still got my hair! Well, what on earth is this thing I'm wearing?
Well, this is a radiation suit.
Radiation suit. Of course.
When listing the most iconic scenes in Back to the Future, you can't skip the moment 1955. Doc watches himself on TV older wilder, and explaining time travel as if it were basic household science. Marty and Doc are so tense they barely breathe, and the audience feels that spark of excitement. This is where it all begins. Yet there's a detail almost everyone misses. A tiny subtle glitch that quietly breaks the entire logic of the scene if you watch closely enough. In the videotape Marty records in 1985, Doc delivers the famous line, "Never mind that now." His voice comes through, clear and crisp, like the camera is pointed straight at him. But when you look at the actual moment Marty films this, the camera isn't aimed at Doc at all. In the original scene, Marty holds the camcorder off to the side, barely capturing Doc on screen, let alone recording perfect audio of a full sentence. In reality, that line shouldn't be on the tape. There's simply no way the microphone could have picked it up. Yet when Marty brings the tape back to 1955, the video plays flawlessly. Young Doc watches his future self speak. Marty looks on nervously, and the audience swept up in the emotional momentum. Never questions the simplest detail. The camera wasn't pointing at Doc Brown. Why did no one notice? Because the scene runs on pure emotional charge. It nails the story's sense of destiny, Doc confronting his own future, and everything that hinges on it. Viewers get pulled straight into that emotional current and forget about practicalities like camera angles. Only when Blu-ray releases arrived and fans started scrubbing frame by frame did they catch this impossible line. Today, the mistake stands as one of the trilogy's classic continuity goofs. Not because it ruins anything, but because it makes fans chuckle. Every rewatch. Even if Doc can bend the laws of physics, Marty's camcorder still can't magically swivel itself to grab the perfect audio, and that tiny slip has become part of the Back to the Future legacy proof that even the mistakes are charming and unforgettable. 8. The remote shows 0 volts, yet still controls the DeLorean. Ask Back to the Future fans. Which moment blew their minds the most, and you'll almost always hear about the DeLorean test at Twin Pines Mall. Neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement, Doc Brown radiating his signature mad scientist energy. Marty standing there, torn between panic and excitement. Then, one press of the remote boom. The DeLorean rockets forward, leaves burning tracks and vanishes straight into space-time. Iconic, foundational, pure cinematic electricity, but buried inside that adrenaline blast is a detail almost no one notices. Doc's remote control displays 0 volts. Yes, right before the car takes off, Doc lifts the remote and the voltmeter clearly reads 0V. By normal scientific standards, a remote with 0 voltage isn't controlling anything. Certainly not a steel-bodied time machine weighing over a ton and about to rip a hole in the fabric of reality. But in the Back to the Future universe, physics occasionally takes a coffee break. The DeLorean still obeys, perfectly hits 80 miles, draws 2 ruler-straight fire trails, and disappears in that glorious white flash etched into every fan's memory. Why does this goof exist? Simple, no one on set thought viewers would stare at that tiny voltmeter. The shot's energy pulls all eyes toward the car, toward Doc, toward the monumental moment about to unfold. No one was pausing, rewinding, or zooming in on a gauge the size of a fingernail. And indeed, nearly 20 years later, once HD releases arrived, fans finally spotted it. Wait, how is this thing running at 0 volts? Cue collective laughter. The mistake doesn't break anything. It just adds a sprinkle of charm. Fans now joke in the Back to the Future universe, 0 volts is still enough for time travel. All you need is Doc Brown. A tiny slip, a funny one, and extremely Back to the Future. 7. Crispin Glover, the lawsuit that shook Hollywood.
Well, actually, I figured since it wasn't due till Monday.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home? Hey, think, McFly, think. I gotta have time to recopy it.
For many viewers, George McFly isn't just a side character in Back to the Future. He's the quiet heart of the entire first film. A shy, awkward kid who keeps ducking away from life until his son from the future accidentally gives him the courage to stand up for himself. George punching Biff doesn't just make Marty proud, it makes the audience feel like they've witnessed a full character awakening in a single moment. Much of that power stems from Crispin Glover's singular performance. He gives George a wonderfully genuine awkwardness, a quirky edge, and an emotional depth that makes the character unforgettable. Which is why, when Back to the Future Part 2 released in 1989, fans immediately sensed something was off. George McFly appeared but looked strangely artificial. A face that moved like wax-stiff expressions, eyes that didn't feel alive. It didn't take long before the truth surfaced. The actor wasn't Crispin Glover at all, but Jeffrey Weissman wearing a prosthetic mask moulded from Glover's face in the first film. So why did this bizarre situation happen? Rumour has it Glover refused to return. In reality, things were far messier. Glover wanted to come back, but he was offered far less money than the other cast members, a deal he felt was unfair. On top of that, he objected to the ending of the first movie where the McFly family becomes wealthy, drives nicer cars, and lives in a bigger house. He believed the message wealth equals happiness contradicted the story's more humane spirit. Negotiations collapsed. A studio could have simply recast the role. Instead, they took a shortcut, replicate Crispin Glover's face without permission, then glue it onto someone else. For Glover, this wasn't a creative disagreement. It was identity theft. He sued Universal Pictures and partially won. The case was settled, but its impact reached far beyond compensation. Hollywood contracts were forever changed. From that point on, actors' agreements had to include explicit terms about the use of their image likeness and facial features, paving the way for today's debates on CGI deepfakes and digital rights. Now, in an era where technology can resurrect actors long gone, the Crispin Glover case stands as an early warning an actor's face is not a prop for anyone to replicate at will. A behind-the-scenes blunder that ended up reshaping Hollywood. 6. Eric Stoltz, fired after 6 weeks, the cold decision that changed the film's fate. Hollywood has its share of behind-the-scenes stories that sound like myths exaggerated impossible, yet completely true. Eric Stoltz being fired from Back to the Future after 6 full weeks of shooting is one of those legends. 6 weeks is no small stint. Thousands of feet of film, dozens of action setups, millions of dollars, and a crew running on caffeine and panic. And then one decision from Robert Zemeckis wiped it all out. Footage never to be used. When production began, Stoltz was the most viable choice. Michael J. Fox was trapped in family ties, and Stoltz had strong buzz after Mask. But from day one, Zemeckis sensed something was off. In his mind, Marty McFly had to be sharp, mischievous, light on his feet, the kind of kid audiences instantly root for. Stoltz delivered a completely different Marty serious, brooding heavy. Worse, Stoltz was a strict method actor. He never dropped character on or off camera. No one was allowed to call him Eric, only Marty existed. Scenes written for laughs turned somber. Chase sequences lost their playful rhythm. Marty McFly slowly morphed into someone who simply wasn't Marty McFly. The crew tried to push through, hoping things would click. Instead, the mood got darker. Gags fell flat, energy drained, and when Zemeckis reviewed the accumulated footage, he faced a brutal truth keeping Stoltz would sink the film. So the cold, devastating decision was made. Stoltz was fired. Everything he shot would be reshot from scratch cost and schedule be damned. Zemeckis then called Michael J. Fox, who was already running himself ragged, filming a sitcom by day. Fox agreed anyway. Days later, under the studio lights, the real Marty McFly finally appeared. People often say, Back to the Future is a story about changing the past to save the future. Sometimes the crew had to change the present to save the movie from a future gone wrong. 5. Christopher Lloyd nearly turned down Doc Brown, a legendary character, almost died on page 1.
This is it. This is the answer. It says here.
For millions of viewers, Doc Brown is the beating heart of Back to the Future, the wild-haired inventor with eyes that spark like unstable plutonium and a great Scott that sounds like the starting gun for every adventure. It's almost impossible to imagine the film without him, yet few know this iconic character nearly never existed. When the Back to the Future script landed at Christopher Lloyd's home in the early 80s, he was completely drained. After years of non-stop stage and television work, he was so exhausted he didn't want to take any role. He skimmed the first few pages, sighed, and then tossed the script straight into the trash. Yes, Doc Brown once lived in a garbage bin. And had it stayed there for even a few days, movie history would look nothing like it does now. Luckily, fate sometimes works through people who aren't even in the spotlight. Lloyd's wife walked into the room, spotted the script in the trash, and decided to rescue it. She handed it back and told him he should at least read it properly instead of rejecting it out of pure exhaustion. Lloyd begrudgingly reopened it, and everything changed the moment he reached the scene where Doc Brown scurries around his chaotic homemade lab, shouting "Great Scott" amid wires, beakers, and deliriously strange inventions. Lloyd said it felt like a bolt of lightning struck him. This was the role that would let him unleash every ounce of pent-up eccentricity, creativity, and glorious madness he'd been bottling up for years. That very night, he called his agent to ask if the role of Doc Brown was still available. Fortunately, just barely it was. The studio wanted to lock in casting quickly. Lloyd accepted immediately. A few months later, under the studio lights, a new cinematic legend was born. The shock white hair, the bug-eyed stare that seems to pierce space-time, and the perfect blend of genius, eccentric, lovable that only Lloyd could deliver. Looking back, it's absurd to think the role that defined Christopher Lloyd's career once sat in a trash can. And thankfully, destiny, or perhaps the flux capacitor, nudged it back onto the right timeline. Because without Lloyd, Back to the Future simply couldn't exist as we know it today. 4. Michael J. Fox filmed the movie in total exhaustion, 2 lives in one body. Watching Back to the Future today, we see a Marty McFly bursting with energy, running, jumping, skateboarding, talking a mile a minute, and somehow always ready for the next disaster. But behind the camera, the reality was the exact opposite. When the lights went off, the actor playing Marty Michael J. Fox was a drained young man running on caffeine willpower and a schedule no human should survive. When he signed on, Fox was still the star of the sitcom Family Ties. That meant no skipping episodes, no reduced hours, and absolutely no time off for a movie, even Back to the Future. But Robert Zemeckis wanted Fox so badly, he agreed to shoot the entire film at night as long as Fox could show up. That's how the nightmare began. Every day, Fox woke up early, shot Family Ties until evening, then sprinted literally to a van waiting outside the studio. The driver sped him straight to the Back to the Future set. There, Fox filmed all night, often until 4 a.m. When the final take wrapped, he collapsed in the back seat on the ride home, cheek pressed against the window, jolting with every bump in the road. By 6 a.m, he was back on the sitcom set, smiling like nothing was wrong. He repeated this schedule for over 60 days straight. No weekends, no recovery. Not a single night of more than 4 hours of sleep, and the strangest part, none of it shows on screen. Fox's Marty still drives the DeLorean with childlike thrill charges into chaos with fearless charm and makes audiences laugh, gasp and worry right on cue. Every high-energy scene, the running, the panic, the fights, was filmed in the middle of the night when Fox was at peak exhaustion. Zemeckis once said, "Without Fox, Back to the Future wouldn't exist." He wasn't exaggerating. The only thing that lived alongside Fox during those brutal nights was the stubborn fire of a young actor convinced he was working on the role of his life. And he was right. Back to the Future became a classic, and Marty McFly became an icon, not because of a time machine, but because one actor was willing to push his body to the edge to make movie magic. 3. Disney rejected the film over the mother falls for her son plot. The fairy tale gate slammed shut.
My name is Lorraine.
Today, Back to the Future is considered one of the most family-friendly films of the 80s. Something parents and kids can watch together, laugh at together, and love together. But ironically, family was exactly the reason Disney despised the project the moment they read the script. When Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale brought the screenplay to Disney, they believed they were pitching something completely safe like sci-fi, time travel, everyday humour, and a heartfelt story about family. It even had the flavour of a modern fairy tale, the kind of thing Disney usually embraced. They expected a meeting smoother than a "when you wish upon a star" melody. Instead, the meeting went off the rails faster than a misaligned DeLorean. The moment Disney execs reach the part where Marty travels back to 1955 and accidentally causes his 17-year-old mother Lorraine to fall for him, the room froze. One executive raised an eyebrow, another set his pen down. And then came the line that killed the project on the spot. "You're asking Disney to make a movie where the mother tries to seduce her own son." Zemeckis and Gale scrambled to clarify. They said it was comedy. They said it created essential conflict. They said it was the key mechanism that allows Marty to change his parents' lives. But for Disney, one word drowned out every explanation. Incest, even if played for humour, even if Marty panics and rejects her, even if the joke is entirely innocent. One executive even quipped, "We make family films, not whatever this is." Minutes later, the project was dismissed outright. No negotiation, no revise and return, no second chance. Disney slammed the door, and Back to the Future was officially banned from the kingdom of fairy tales after a single meeting. Looking back, if Disney had accepted the film, one of its most unique and memorable beats might have been erased: the wonderfully awkward sequence where Marty freaks out while young Lorraine unknowingly crushes on her future son. Bold, slightly bonkers, and absolutely incompatible with Disney, but an essential piece of the movie we all adore. 2. The original time machine was a nuclear refrigerator, an idea that nearly put kids in danger. Few cinematic icons are cooler than the silver DeLorean in Back to the Future. One gull-wing door lifts, and you instantly know this is no ordinary car. But in the earliest drafts, Marty McFly's time machine wasn't a car at all. It was a giant nuclear-powered refrigerator. Yes. In the first concept phase, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale imagined the time travel device as something bulky, dangerous, rough sci-fi. Marty would get trapped inside it, then have to haul the fridge to a nuclear test site in Nevada, the real desert where the US detonated atomic bombs in the 1950s. When the bomb went off, the blast would power the machine and send Marty back to the future. Epic absolutely, sensible. Not really, safe, not even close. When Zemeckis brought the idea to Steven Spielberg, the film's producer, Spielberg spotted a fatal problem immediately: kids imitate what they see. If Marty McFly climbed into a refrigerator, only to time travel moments later, children across America might decide fridges were fun hiding spots. And historically, kids had died after getting trapped inside old sealed refrigerators. Spielberg shut the idea down on the spot, not because it was bad, but because it was too dangerous to ever put on film. And that rejection opened a new door. What if the time machine was a car. The idea was simple, practical, and most importantly, safe. When the DeLorean was suggested, everything clicked: futuristic shape, gull-wing doors, stainless steel body, and just the right amount of eccentric flair to match Doc Brown's personality. From a nuclear fridge time machine to a time-traveling car, no one could have predicted that this tiny pivot would create one of the most iconic movie designs of all time. 1. Ronald Reagan and the greatest plot twist in the history of movies and the White House.
Who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, the actor? Then who's vice president? Jerry Lewis?
In Back to the Future, there's a tiny scene that always gets a laugh and once made the filmmakers sweat bullets. It's the moment Marty McFly tries to convince 1955 Doc Brown that he's from the future. Marty blurts out, "The president in 1985 is Ronald Reagan." Doc instantly scoffs. Ronald Reagan. The actor. Then who's Vice President Jerry Lewis? A line as sharp as a scalpel slicing straight into Reagan's acting career. Except Reagan at that moment wasn't just an actor. He was the sitting president of the United States. In Hollywood, poking fun at an actor is harmless. Poking fun at a president currently in office, that's playing with fire. The entire crew quietly panicked. What if the White House took offense? What if they demanded the scene be removed? Then something completely unexpected happened. When the film was screened at the White House, everyone held their breath, waiting for Reagan's reaction. Some advisors were visibly nervous about the joke's sensitivity, but when the line played, the president burst into laughter. Not a polite chuckle, a full, delighted roar. He even asked to rewind the scene and watch it again. For a moment, the most powerful man in the world vanished, replaced by the Hollywood performer he used to be, self-aware, self-deprecating, and utterly amused. But Reagan didn't stop there. In February 1986, during his State of the Union address broadcast nationwide, to millions, he quoted one of the film's most famous lines. "Where we're going, we don't need roads." Doc Brown's sci-fi declaration suddenly became a national motto, a promise of innovation, ambition, and forward momentum for America. A throwaway cinematic line was elevated into a political symbol. A Hollywood joke became a presidential proclamation. And with that moment, Back to the Future didn't just remain a hit movie, it became a piece of American cultural history, immortalized at the highest level of government. When you look back at these behind-the-scenes stories, you realize something very Back to the Future perfection doesn't create legends. It's the cracks, the slip-ups, the strange accidents that sneak into the final cut that make a film truly immortal. Those mistakes, those on-set mishaps, those moments that should never have happened, are exactly what give Back to the Future its magic. They remind us the movie wasn't crafted by a flawless machine, but by real humans, creative, exhausted, passionate, sometimes clumsy, but always burning with the desire to make something extraordinary. And maybe that's why Back to the Future has endured for nearly 40 years. Not just because the story works, but because every rewatch reveals something new. A tiny goof, a botched moment, a strange look as if the film is still alive, still evolving, still whispering to us across time. So what about you? Which detail struck you the most? Or is there a blooper we missed that you've spotted? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe to keep exploring the secrets behind Hollywood's golden age classics.